there, and welcome back to The Friendly Fox. I'm going to try something today that I've never made before. Daughter asked me to make a book tote, so I'm going to do the Dior Dupe book tote. And I didn't have a pattern for it, and the patterns aren't available. So I have watched a lot of YouTube videos to find the best one, and I've made probably 6 trying to find the best pattern. I've had to modify it a little bit because of the one that I did like didn't include all the pattern pieces, but I've gone ahead and created the pattern. So let's get creative and do this. One thing that you need to watch when you're making one of these bags is that your fabric has to run the direction of your pattern. So you wouldn't want to cut this front piece this way because it would look silly. So you want to make sure that the direction of your pattern, you wouldn't want to cut this one this way. So the direction of your pattern is important when you're laying the pattern piece up onto the fabric. So, remembering that, I have one now. It doesn't matter if I go this way or this way, but yeah, just be aware of that if you're using a fabric that is a definite pattern. I've got fronts, backs, my handles, the side panel. So I'm going to cut the fabric first, and then I'm going to cut the lining out. Notice that I don't use pins very often. I don't see the point in putting pins in to carry it across the room to take the pins out and sew. And for me, when you're using a fabric pattern, it doesn't slip and slide, so you don't need pins. Some things you need pins for, but not very often. I try to maximize everything that I sew with, but I wouldn't consider myself a cheapskate sewer. I don't. I always buy more fabric than I need, and I'm not real tight about cutting everything out to maximize everything that I can get out of the fabric. That's the body of the piece cut. I'm going to do the lining. Choose a fabric that is close in color to the fabric that you're going to use. So that's the fabric that I'm using, and I could have gone with a dark brown, but I like the lighter colors better. Find that the inside of a purse, you can see things better if it's a lighter color. This pattern will be on the Friendly Fox .co for download. Just pull the download tab down and click on the pattern that you'd like. This pattern's finicky. I wouldn't suggest trying to get it done in an hour. It's going to take a little more time than that. So that's all the pieces cut out. There are only 3 pieces that you do in the lining. That's a lower gusset, the body panel inside the side, this piece here, and the lining of the bottom of the bag. Everything else is cut out from the fabric that you want to show on the outside. This is not an easy pattern for a beginner, but if you go slow and you take your time, I believe you could probably get it done. So I'm going to cut interfacing for this bag now. And I've tried it a lot of different ways. I've tried it without interfacing. I've tried it with very heavy interfacing. This pattern, this bag is going to depend on the strength of your sewing machine. So if you've got a lightweight sewing machine, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But I found a workaround on it in that I'm going to use the heavy interfacing, but instead of cutting the interfacing the full size of the pattern, I'm going to come in about 1/2 inch all the way around. So the This is the pattern piece for the body. I'm going to cut the interfacing about a ½ inch smaller than the actual pattern piece all the way around. A hack on that is to take the pattern piece and actually lay it up a little bit smaller so that when you cut it out, you're cutting out on this line and it will naturally just be smaller than the piece that you're going to be working with. Interfacing is not easy to work with. This is a fusible, so it's iron-on, and I need 2 of those because there's a front and the back side to the bag. So I'll be cutting 2 of those. And if you want it really stiff, you could add a second, you could fuse these 2 together and then use that to actually stitch the fabric to. I don't want it that stiff, so I'm going to go with just 1 layer. So that's the side of the bag. Now I've got to cut the side pieces. These pieces here. Again, using the same method, I'm going to cut it just a little bit smaller. And really, the only thing, I need 2 of those, so I'm going to cut another one. The only thing that needs to be cut in interfacing is the 2 of these, 2 of these, and the bottom. So you're not cutting a whole, oh, and the handles. You need a little stiffener in the handles too. And this is the bottom, and you only need 1 of these. Remember to cut it a little bit smaller than you need it. And I know it doesn't make much sense now, but when you see me construct this thing, you'll understand why it needs to be cut a little bit smaller. Of course, you need 2 of those. Let's go sew. Okay, so these are the handles. This is one I've already done, and this is the next one. So I'm going to press under just to get it to stay there. Be very careful that your iron doesn't touch this interfacing. And don't ever do a shot of steam when you're doing interfacing, because the steam causes it to shrink in and then it makes your fabric go all wrinkly. So always just use dry heat when you're doing interfacing, fusible interfacing. There are times when you'll use iron-on interfacing, but because you want this to have integrity, it can't be floating. It's got to be actually attached to the fabric. So now I'm going to go to the machine and stitch, top stitch right there, and that's going to be our handles. So from each side, as a marker, you're going to come into 10 and into 10 on this side. And that's where we're going to stop the stitching. So I'm going to go ahead now to the machine and top stitch from bit pin to pin. And that's the handle. This is what your handle is going to look like. So you don't stitch all the way down. Now we're going to take the handles and place them on the top part that is actually going to be fastened here. So we're going to take the handle and fasten it here. In order to do that, I want to find the middle of this piece of fabric. So there's the center. And then I want to cut that in half right there. And that's where that piece is going to go. And it's going to come all the way down to the bottom here. And we'll stitch. Now I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to stitch here. So now I've stitched that to the handle. I'm going to take the piece with the pocket on it and lay it right over top. And then I'm going to stitch across here on both sides. Now I'm doing a 1/2 inch seam allowance on this. So now I'm going to press this down and top stitch right along here. So that's that top stitch now. So we're going to turn that down and taking the body of the bag, this is going to be the side panel, we're going to stitch right sides together right along this top edge on both pieces. So that's where I just stitched. Now I'm going to open it up. I'm going to press it and top stitch here, and then I'm going to top stitch on both of these. So that's what it's going to look like on the outside. But for now, I'm going to top stitch right here. So that's the top stitching done now, and I'm going to stitch the handles down. Be sure when you're doing those stitches that you're on the single layer. Otherwise, the stitching is going to show through on the outside. This is the side gusset that goes on the side here. And so it's this piece right there. And then the lining is attached to it. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm going to put a stitch across a seam right here that will then look like that from the other side. So I'm working on the side panels now. Now I'm going to go over there and press it open, and I will do top stitching right here. Now I'll go and top stitch that, and then we're going to work with these two side panels. In order to get these lined up properly, we're going to mark this top and bottom. So that small V there will line up with the small V that I'm going to put in here. So now with those small V's cut out, we're going to match them, and I'm going to do a 1/2 inch seam along the top of that. Okay, now I'm going to go press that open and top stitch. So I've done that stitch there. Now I'm going to press it open. I'm going to flip it. Now I'm going to go back to the machine again and top stitch right there. So I've done that top stitching there. And now, remember I told you the interfacing had to be a little smaller. And so I'm putting the interfacing in now because while I want it to have that structural integrity, I can't have it interfering with the final part of putting the whole bag together. So now those are the two side panels done. Now I'm going to do the bottom and put the interface on the bottom of here. Now, to get all these to line up, I have to put the V's in here. So folding it in half and marking the center point. This is going to be the lining. I cut the lining out of this fabric for the bottom of the bag, but through discussion, we've decided to do it in the matching fabric to the actual bag. So again, I'm going to mark the center. And now I'm going to take one side and stick, I'm going to line up these, this is the bottom, I'm going to line up the V, and then I'm going to line up the V of the lining piece. Okay, so I'm going to have the bottom of the bag, the side of the bag, and then the lining is going to go on top of it all. So right sides together, and then the right side of the lining is going to be facing the right side of that lining. And now I'm going to stitch right here. This is where it can get tough for your machine. So it's a short seam to do. And this is why you don't want to put too many layers of the interfacing, because it just makes it harder for your machine. So this is one side panel attached to the bottom of the bag, to the bottom. So now that I've pressed this open, I'm going to top stitch right here, and then we're going to fasten this side of the bag. So I'll top stitch this first. Okay, so I've done that top stitch there. So that's the side of the bag attached to the base of the bag. Now, I'm going to open this up, flip it over, attach the other side with right sides together, matching the V's. And now I'm going to turn this under and take this bottom lining, matching the V's, and I'm going to do a stitch there. So now I've just done that stitch there. And when you turn it all inside out, you end up with the two sides, the bottom, and that's the outside. So I'm going to give this a top stitch right here to match the top stitch on the other bottom. So now is when I'm going to put the interfacing into the side panel. And you'll see in the next step why it has to be cut so much smaller and why you have to do it at the end. So that will give it the stiffness that we need on the walls of the bag. Now you'll see why we couldn't take it all the way out to the edge. With these top sides matched, we're going to turn this side under and under again. So this, I don't know if you can see that, but this turn here is going to be the binding to hold the front of the bag to the side of the bag. And the first time I made one, I got really nervous that I ended up with all this extra down here. But you'll see we actually need that when we do the seam across here. So now I'm going to go to my machine and stitch this under. So now I have this side stitched here that is going to create the interior of the bag. And then now I have to stitch this side of the bag to this side gusset. So you can see it starting to come together. Now I'll do the same thing here. I'll turn it under twice and create this seam. Okay, so now I've got that side seam done. I'm going to go and stitch this other front to the side gusset. So now with the two sides done, I'm going to do the other side. So I'm going to go through the same process, matching the top corner, and I'm going to turn this over twice. And this is why you don't bring the interfacing all the way out to the side. I don't know if you can see that, but there's the interfacing cut back there. If the interfacing came all the way out to here, there's no way you could take that and in bulk turn it over. But there's also no way your sewing machine is going to go through it unless you're sewing on an upholstery machine. But even if you are sewing on an upholstery machine, it's going to create so much bulk in the bag. So make sure you keep that interfacing at least a ½ inch away from the side seam. And then your machine won't be too mad going through one layer of it. I found with this pattern, your measurements have to be bang on. You can't fudge this. Otherwise, when you get to these critical points right now, nothing will match up. It's the classic measure twice and cut once. Okay, now I'm going to go and put this seam down the side here to attach this other front. Okay, and now I'm going to go and iron, and we're going to do this last side. And so for the fourth time, I'm going to match up these top lines here, and I'm going to go stitch this side seam. You'll notice on all of them, I stop about 1 centimeter before I get to this line here. That's the side seams done. It's starting to look like a bag. Now we just have to fasten this bottom. So doing the same technique, I'm going to turn this over twice and stitch it along here. In the corners here, it goes to become like a 45-degree angle. So I'll turn that under twice and see how that creates a 45 right there? And that's where I'm going to stitch. In order to keep the lining intact with this piece here and this piece here, I'm going to just run a quick tack right here. So now that's the inside of the bag. And now I'm going to do this bottom the same way, making that 45. So now, keeping everything else out of the way, I'm going to stitch right along this line here, and that'll be our bag done. Okay, so it's taken me the better part of a day to do this. I'm going to spend another little while here clipping all my threads and tying everything off, but that's it finished. Inside with the pockets, and yeah, we're ready. So there you go, the Dior Dupe book tote. These are great just all around general purses, but these are great for doing grocery shopping with. So there you go. Thanks for joining me.